Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Con O'Neill Festival 2020, the third annual Con O'Neill Festival, and the very first one that, for reasons beyond our control, we have had to go online. Yesterday was great, and some of you may have gone on a little bit of a detour before finding yesterday. If you missed it for some reason or you're indisposed, we're going to have most of the content, if not all of the content, online on YouTube for tourists and on Monday or Tuesday. So join us on all our socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, Cards of Tourists. You're probably watching us now, so I don't need to tell you to go there. And we'll give you updates then about when and where things become available. Con O'Neill, then, the last Gaelic Earl of Upper Clannaboy. We went right into his history yesterday. It was great fun. And we had some lovely music from True. We spoke to Roy Greer about his book. And we learned all about the flora and fauna and magnificent online games, which are available at cardsoftourist.com, where you can go up the glen and the fairies will challenge you to find flowers and various other things. So it's all great. So for the next hour and 20 minutes or so, we have Gaelic East Belfast, which is coming up in just a second. We have a kind of an art project, which is called Con's Great Escape, and it's a ripping yarn. There is a long video at the end of this session, Discover Craigie Glen with Mark Doherty. So altogether, it's going to be a great, fun-filled occasion. So my name is Stuart Bailey. I do some work with tourists, and it's been my pleasure to be the anchorman for the last day and today as well. And excuse me if I gibber, but we're trying to kind of manage lots of different things. So without further ado, then, Gaelic East Belfast. I hope his ears were burning yesterday because he's done such a pioneering job of telling us the layers of history and introducing us to the centuries of history in East Belfast long before we kind of thought we knew the story. Gordon McCoy has been there. He's been up the hills. He's been on the ruins of Castlereagh Castle. He has taken us to the old graveyards. He is about to show us the derivation of the Red Hand and what it means, and again, how far back these stories go. This was a video made about a year ago, I think, long before the pandemic and before the magnificent Gaelic bus tours came to a standstill. And we're so glad that it has been put together. Thank you very much to Martin for preserving it and for updating it. And thank you for Gordon for bringing those stories to our attention. So here it is, and this is the Gaelic history of East Belfast. And a mighty salute to Gordon McCoy.
East Belfast has many layers of fascinating history. We know more about our hidden past thanks to Gordon McCoy, Education Officer with the Tourist Organisation. One of his great projects has been the Gaelic Bus Tour of East Belfast, a movable feast of learning and storytelling. This bus tour was halted by the pandemic in 2020, but this has given us the chance to edit some documentary footage of Gordon in his element, delving into other worlds. Our journey starts in a tourist classroom in the Skeanos building on the Newtownards Road.
Someone said to me, it's great to see that you're importing this culture, this Irish culture, Gordon, into East Belfast. And I started thinking, is there anything about the Irish culture in East Belfast that's here already? And I started off with the place names and the townland when I discovered, to my shock, that I lived in Ballymaconachie, although I live on the Craigie Road. So I started off with townland and I worked my way up to creating a whole history of East Belfast from all the scattered fragments, which has turned into a bus tour. My work is trying to indigenize the Irish language in East Belfast to make it part of the culture. and to make our work be in tandem with the Connswater development, with the local heritage development of the area, and with tourism in the area, so that although it's unusual, a Gaelic history in East Belfast, it's part of something bigger as well, and that we're giving something back to the East.
The Red Hand of Ulster is part of the local landscape, but the backstory is stranger than we might have imagined.
So here we are in the old Ulster Bank on Hollywood Arches, and we have a symbol above us, Lav Jarag Erin, which is the Red Hand of Ireland. It's a simplified form of Lav Jarag Erin, and the Red Hand of Ireland, which was the symbol of the O'Neills of Ulster. A symbol which they adopted from an earlier people, a confederation of people called the Ulleth. And one of the tribes of the Ulleth were the McGuinnesses of South Down. And the first poem to mention the Red Hand of Ireland, or the Red Hand of Ulster, is attributed to them. It was written by a guy called Malachlin O'Higgin in the year 1426 or 1427 to praise the McGuinnesses, and says, it says, Lav Jarag Erin Ivachach Rigru go Run Cart Brehev Leikri na Lav Jaraga. So the Ivachach, that is the McGuinnesses, the Lords of Ivy, are the Red Hand of Ireland. And it goes on to describe how they never refused war and how they battled without giving compensation. So in Irish law, you had to give compensation to someone if you hurt them or injured them. And if you killed someone, your hand was red until the debt was cleared. But these people of Ulster, the McGuinnesses, were proud not to give compensation to the rest of Ireland, with whom they waged war. So they were proud to be outlaws and have their hands red.
Next stop is the Castlereagh Hills above the city, and a site that connects us to an era that predates even the O'Neill dynasty.
Okay, long before there were the O'Neills here, there was a tribe called the Dalfeadach, and we believe that this is one of the first sites they built. It's a network of forts called Lisnabrini, and this is the most well-known one. And it is the first evidence of Irish speakers. It built between 600 and 900, and they would have come to live here rather than into the Belfast city area, because that would have been too swampy or too woody, and there was much more cleared land, dry land up here. The fort is banked up facing the north break the wind, and it's south facing in a way, so it sort of catches all the sun. And it would have been used to, there's a bit of a debate about this actually, to keep out animals who have been brought in at night, and it would have been used to protect them from raiders or wolves. Another idea is that it conferred status on the owner. Also, crops would have been grown in the area outside, and then the animals brought in the evening. And there would have been a dwelling here as well. Later in the 19th century, they became sort of features of places. So farmers would have put trees and hedgerows around them in the way you see today to make a sort of a feature out of them. And later Irish speakers didn't really know who lived in them, and they're often called Danes forts. And this one was called Lisnabrini, which means Fort of the Ferry Hostel. So people believed that fairies lived in them, and they wouldn't go near them. So, for example, Lisnagarvey, which gives its name to Lisburn, is Fort of the Gamblers, because people would go there and gamble because they'd be left alone. So the Dalfeadach were a tribe that were pushed north and east by the O'Neills, and they had their capital at Owen Macha. They lost that, so they made a new capital at Downpatrick, and they extended as far as here. And they battled the Dalnaratha, the other people of the Ulleth Confederation, which gave its name to Ulster, at Belfast. And eventually they conquered them and moved over and one of their kings was called Matadan, and he gave his name to Ben Madigan, which gives us Cave Hill of today.
Con O'Neill was the last Gaelic lord of Upper Clanaboy. He died in 1619, and his name endures in the place names and the lore of East Belfast. His final resting place is near Moatlands, off the old Hollywood Road.
So here we are in Moatlands, and this is called Moatlands because there was a Norman motte here, and it was quite an escarpment behind us, and there was a Norman motte which was levelled later, but also this became a graveyard, and there was a church here from about 1307 at least, and in this graveyard Con O'Neill was buried. He wasn't buried where he wanted to be buried in Knock Graveyard. He's buried in this one in Ballymachan, which was less important. In fact, the church is believed to be in ruins when he was buried. And what there is a lot of waste ground, and there aren't any gravestones. They were used to build the first moat house, which is just behind us here. Church is completely gone. It's probably buried under Finchley Park to our left here, but we still have an acre of ground, which is where Con was buried. And there's also a sort of a unionist myth about the area that King Billy's troops were here on the way to the Battle of the Boyne and died over the winter. A lot of them died and were buried here in shallow graves. And so horses and cows wouldn't eat at the site after that. So for both reasons, it was a graveyard for both sides. But today it's for sale. It's been zoned for Belfast City Council as for housing development. So Con's going to be like Richard III in reverse. It's going to be concreted over. Hugh McCartan wrote a book called The Glamour of Belfast, and he had this to say about Ballymachan here. Luckless Con O'Neill, last Tanist of the yellow-haired clan, whose beginnings are lost in the darkness before the dawn of history, sleep lightly in your forgotten grave in Ballymachan, undisturbed by the thought that the grey castle is now but a grassy mound beside a wall of ancient stones. He won't sleep lightly here anymore when the bulldozers come.
There's another little-known graveyard in East Belfast. This is the Knock Cemetery.
The wall was built here in about the 1850s, which was to deter grave robbers. And actually, you can actually see a lot of slabs lying flat, and I thought they'd actually fallen over. It turns out they were laid there to deter people from getting at the graves. So quite interesting for a lot of historical reasons. Some of the people buried here include the Beers of Beersbridge, and there was a young soldier in the First World War who was injured, and he died in 1919 from his injuries. He returned and died a year later. So for many reasons, it's quite interesting, and a lot of people I bring here haven't seen it before, and they don't know it exists. But it is the holy hill of Columkill, not Columkillia, and Columkill got knocked off the title, so it just became Knock after that. And it had a holy well, and below us, and the holy well is now under Shandon Golf Club because they filled it in. They were losing their balls, or either that, or it's under the Knock dual carriageway. But it has vanished from view as well. So a holy Catholic past in East Belfast. Edmund McCanna was a Franciscan friar, and he did a tour of Ulster in 1643, which is a bit of an odd thing to do because there was a rebellion in 1641 and would have been a bit dangerous for him to come here. But he wrote, between Comer and the estuary Loch Lee, which flows by the towns of Carrickfergus and Belfast, is a church dedicated to St. Columba, which Neill O'Neill, the chief of Train Congal, endowed with many valuable lands and many privileges. And that is this site here, which was a church of St. Columkill, who is meant to have prayed on the way to Movilla Abbey to be trained by St. Finian. Now his church, there's nothing left of it except a high bank. And what we think is that the Anglican Church, which took over this site, took away the stones from the church in order to make more room for graves. It became an Anglican graveyard. But in Con O'Neill's time, this would have been his local church, and this would have been the place he would like to have been buried. He, in a land agreement, when he was selling a lot of land, he said he would like the patronage of the Kirk of Knockholmkilja, which is this holy hill of Knock. So he obviously had a great interest in it, but it was not to be. His final ignominy was to be buried elsewhere, somewhere less important. Now, it's very interesting historically. It was closed a lot during the Troubles because it's so close to the RUC headquarters. So it's in prime nick. It hasn't been vandalised. Also, it has a very high wall to deter grave robbers.
One of the most compelling places in the Con O'Neill story is at the top of the church road, looking down over Belfast. This was the site of Con's castle.
Okay, we're at the site of Castlereagh and Castle-in-Riwach, or the Grey Castle, which would have been a Norman house, such as you find in Kale, like Audleystown, something like that. And it would have had 4 levels and turrets, and would have a community around it and a wall around itself, and a source of water down the hill. This was the capital of Upper Clandyboy, which was a Gaelic lordship which controlled East Belfast and North Down. From here, you could have seen Belfast Castle. Belfast would have just had a castle and the Chapel of the Ford at the time, maybe a few huts around it and that sort of thing. And at the time of Con O'Neill, it was controlled by the English. And there would have been, as someone put it, George Ben, a smothered animosity between the English and the Irish. But the English were trading with the Irish from here. They brought in things like wine, iron products, implements, and traded them for farm produce and things like that. So there was a sort of relationship. Although the English called Con's Castle the Eagle's Nest, so obviously an eagle that had to be toppled from his perch. There is no sign now of the castle. In 1608, when Con was going badly, as they'd say, he'd lost 2/3 of his land, and he had 1/3 left, which he sold off. And in 1608, he sold off Castlereagh Castle, and he died in 1619. And he sort of wandered around the hills of Castlereagh between that and his death, a bit aimlessly, really. He sold it to Moses Hill, who did it up a bit and then let it fall apart because he took in more of an interest in Hillsborough and Hill Hall. So it disappeared in the 1900s, and again, people would have taken stones from it to build houses. And by the start of the 20th century, it completely disappeared, and nobody knew where it was. So in 1984, Castlereagh District Council decided to have a look for it, and they came up here and they got a dig up the hill. And along came Gladys Douglas, a local teacher from Lead Hill Primary School just down the road, and she said to the archaeologists, "You're looking in the wrong place." And they said, "Look, we know what we're doing." And she said, "Well, I think you're looking in the wrong place." And she had the last laugh because they found nothing but a Caffrey's bottle. And she found her site, which is just down here, has now been accepted by Queen's archaeologists as the site of the castle. And they're going to do a sonic scan here of the entire field, and they hope to find the foundations of the castle. If they do, it'll be momentous for East Belfast history to find the site of Castlereagh Castle. So Con really became a cropper because he fell out with the English. He was in the pay of the English during the 9 Years' War at the start of his reign, but then he decided to rebel. And there are various stories of how he ended up in jail during a rebellion or during a period when his soldiers got in trouble with soldiers at Belfast Castle, the English soldiers, and killed some of them, or killed one of them at any rate, over a fight about wine. But Con ended up in Carrickfergus jail, the capital of the English control in Ireland, or Northern Ireland. And it's rumoured that Arthur Chichester wanted to hang him and grab his land. So he decided to sign away half his land to Hugh Montgomery if he helped him escape, which he did. And then came along another guy called James Hamilton, who said to the king, "Don't give Con, that Irishman, half his land back, give him a third, give me another third. So his land was partitioned into thirds. And basically Con got the Carried Off area and East Belfast, which nobody wanted because it was sort of a swamp or heavily wooded. And it was called the Domains of Castlereagh, and that's the bit that he kept. The coast, Bangor, Newtownards, North Down was all gone. And that's what began basically the beginning of the plantation of Ulster by Scots. And Con's irrelevance then, he sold the rest of his land. He didn't make a very good country squire. And so George Ben, an historian of Belfast, put it in a great way. I'll read out a quote from him. It is curious to consider that in so short a space, the castle in which Neill had so long dwelt, which had been looked upon with pride and confidence, should have utterly disappeared from the face of the earth. That the fir tree should grow on the hearthstone, and which he caroused with his trusty followers. That the lands which were stocked with his friends and vassals should now be inhabited by a race of people different in language, manners, customs, laws, names, and religion. That the ground in which his bones and the bones of his fathers rest should every year be disturbed by the rough hand of the careless rustic, and that his very tombstone should be the threshold of a barn.
So thank you to Gordon McCoy and to Conor Gaeilge for that as well. And just what a magnificent story. Everything seems to be tying together rather nicely during the festival. And Con O'Neill has been in the backstory of history for such a long time. And the efforts of Gordon and Turris are succeeding in bringing him out of history, which is a wonderful thing. So we've got a little bonus feature. Oh, before we forget, another great piece of work from Gordon is a big fold-out map. It's called Townlands of Belfast and Gaelic Townlands of Belfast. And it's fantastic. It was launched in March, just before the lockdown. And I believe there are still some copies left. So if you want to see the whole story of the city and the names of the townlands right up to the kind of up the top of the hills to Balmanigan and right up to the Castlereagh Hills, then send a nice letter to Belfast City Council or we email, and they might be able to procure one. And if you're really stuck, then talk to Turris on the socials next week, and we'll see if we can find some. So magnificent work from Gordon, and all very good indeed. We're going to give you a little bonus feature now. Good Relations Week was 2 weeks ago, if my memory serves me well. And at the QFT, with every showing, there was a Turris video, and it was Gail's story, and it was a story about how someone had discovered the Irish language in Belfast. And this is a sort of a kind of a director's cut or a commentary. And it's got all the people, including Linda, who were part of that project, and explain how it came to be and how Gail's video, a fantastic animation, came to be. So we're going to have a look at that now. Cheers then. Okay, you're very welcome to a very special event. We are going to preview a video which has been made by an organisation in East Belfast called Turris. Turris is Irish for journey. The mission statement for Turris is Ag Fólam na Chéile, which is learning together, and that's exactly what they've been doing for the last 9 years or so. Linda will give us a little history in a moment. But there's an animation that's been brewing for a little while now, and we've got a team of people that are going to join us, and they're going to talk us through what it is. And at the very end of this conversation, we're going to be able to watch the video, which is really great. So first of all, then, I'm going to call in Linda from Turris, Just to give us a little idea of how this project came together. Basically, there's a chance to animate some learners and to talk about their own personal journeys. And but all of these things take friends and take people with budgets and support. So talk us through it, and Linda, how it all came together.
Well, I think, Stuart, over the last lot of years, from Tourists Started, I've always been amazed at just the diversity of people who come to Tourists, who learn Irish, and for a myriad of reasons. And I've always been interested in their stories. And at the beginning of the year, I would say, well, why do you come? Why are you interested in the Irish language? And I wanted, I suppose, to record their stories in some way. But at the beginning, that was difficult because some people were frightened. They were worried about other people knowing they were learning Irish, didn't want neighbours or friends, sometimes even relatives knowing they were learning Irish. And I thank goodness that has changed. But it was still something in my mind that, I thought, that the richness of people's stories. So this was a way through animation that we were able to give people anonymity if they wanted it, but they don't seem to want anonymity. But, to let their stories speak in a way that I suppose doesn't date and give them a voice in a very short way, but a very powerful way, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we're going to bring out a virtual red carpet, really, for this event. And Gail McCune, there are testimonies from a series of tourist learners. There's going to be a whole series of animations, but you're the very first one. What was that a daunting experience when you were kind of telling your story?
It was actually quite a fun experience. I just met with Dawn, who we'll meet shortly, and we had a very long chat. Turns out that was quite easy because he and I can both talk for, Dublin and Belfast. It was just a chance to tell people about why I've been learning Irish. And there wasn't really one specific reason. There was just a whole myriad of reasons that came together when the opportunity arose.
So you literally walked in off the street to the tourist building at Skinnos on the Newton Arch Road. Mm-hmm. And the video itself, or the animation itself, you were a little bit trepidatious, but you've gone right through the rungs of the ladder into further education. Isn't that correct?
That is. I'm still not quite sure why, but I'm just about to start my second year at Queen's.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll bring in Dawn at this point, who was one of Dawn's jobs then was to conduct the interviews. And I guess, sometimes there were long form videos. You're looking for short, succinct pieces then that will capture the personality of the person and also the excitement of the journey. Isn't that right, Dawn?
Yeah, that's right, Stuart. And it's been really interesting working in animation. That's kind of a new area for me. I'm more sort of from a journalism background and live video background. And with animation, and you'll talk to Chris about that later, it was just really interesting to be able to tell people stories, but look at sort of different aspects of what they're saying. There's a much more potential to kind of capture the magic of their experience through animation. But for me, yeah, like Gail was saying, we sat down, we just kept talking because it was just really interesting and it was really funny. And it was kind of, I suppose, sharing an experience of discovering Irish. I'm from Longford in the Midlands of the Republic of Ireland. So my experience with Irish was through a very sort of official school-based primary school context. And it's been really interesting for me since I've moved to Belfast to discover different people's and different experience of Irish. So, and the different ways you can fall in love with the language and the different ways it can mean different things to different people. So this story, Gail's experience with Irish was really interesting to hear as I interviewed her, but also I think it's even more interesting to look at with the animation because there's aspects of what she was saying that have been really highlighted and sort of punched up through the animation. So I'm really, really excited about this, and I'm looking forward to all the other people that we're going to talk to and whose stories we're going to animate as this project moves forward.
Okay, well, we got Dawn then, who's fishing for the quotes and trying to get to the heart of a journey and of a learning experience. And then at some point, then the audio goes to Chris Kelly. And Chris Kelly's job then is to kind of create a visual story around it. Then, Chris, was that fun or was that a challenge or both?
Yeah, no, it was absolutely fun. I would start by saying that it goes beyond myself to the other team members with animation, and it's generally it's a medium that takes a lot of time and a lot of people. And we had a fantastic team of Vicky, who very much looked after the project, and Carla, who led on the project. And for them, it's always a fun, exciting experience to embark on some new piece of content. When Dawn and Linda approached us, we hadn't really worked that much on Irish language content. We had created some small promo stuff in the past, so we understood a little bit, but for us it was a very new experience as well. And it kind of created its own production kind of, I wouldn't say problems, production kind of requirements from that point of view.
Okay, so meantime then, Linda, you're waiting expectantly on the results. I suppose you've already, I guess, by selecting certain people and certain life stories, you're already kind of steering the animations towards people who have come at the language in an interesting way. Were you nervous when you were waiting to see how it was going to come out? Were you excited?
Well, I think, what we wanted to do, I suppose, was challenge the stereotypes, and that was one of the reasons that we chose Gail's story. The most difficult thing was because Gail's story was so rich, there was lots of different ways we could have went down, and we had to decide, no, this is going to be the story, this is going to be the part. So we passed it then on to Enter Yes, and it was wonderful just waiting with expectation to see what was going to turn out. When we met with them, even when they showed us samples of their work, and we had a bit of a brainstorm and ideas, it really was such an exciting process. It was a long and slow process. There's an awful lot of work goes in the animation, and I'm really blown away by the sheer ability of the artists and their imagination and their creativity. So every time an email would have come from Vicky, I opened it with excitement to see, where are we now, what's it going to look like? And I have to say the finished product is just amazing.
Okay, these things, I'm sure they're excellent value, but they need resourcing, you need supporting, Linda. So presumably then there's people in the side of this activity then that are giving you the wherewithal then to make it happen.
Absolutely, we have a number of funders who have helped us, and CRC were the first funder who came on board as part of their media grant. And if it hadn't been for them, then we wouldn't have been able to do it. Urban Villages as well, the Esme Trust, Community Foundation too. So there's been a number of funders who have said, yes, we'll help you. Queen's University have provided funding for us going ahead to help us to make more of the animations. And we're very excited because now we've started on Ivor's story. And he's looking at the place names. He talks about a magic door. It's just amazing. So that's one that we're so excited about, and we can't wait to see it out there.
Well, there you go. Our interest is piqued. Everyone is talking up a good game. Now we have to watch and see whether it all pulls together. I'm very sure that it will. So it remains for me to say thanks to Chris and Gail and Linda and Dawn Guramayagiv.
I don't really know what the spur was. I thought, if I don't go, I'll chicken out and never go. So I literally went the next morning, and I was walking down, and the closer I got, the more I started looking around to see if there was anybody else who looked like they might be going. I was expecting like a classroom format. The chairs were set out and set in a horseshoe. And I know that they'd been running 1 or 2 weeks already, so I was a bit worried in case I'd missed a lot. And Matthew just jumped straight in with Kajay Shin, Shin Bujil Ishka. And then he addressed the class Kajay Shin, and the entire class answered Shin Bujil Ishka. You were watching, where's he going, what's he going to get, and the fact that everybody was answering together, if you didn't remember, it didn't matter. I can remember after the first week going home and going, my head felt like it was swimming because there's so much stuff in it. And I suppose I'd gone down expecting to maybe learn 2 or 3 phrases, but instead there was 40, 50, 60 words all flying around my head.
And I remember doing the dishes going, sin plata, sin bowl, sin fork, you know, and laughing at myself and standing in the kitchen going to see if anybody could hear what was going on in my head. My name is Gail McCune. I am from East Belfast and I am a Protestant Irish speaker.
Good work, Gail, and everybody else who made that magnificent video happen. Okay, the Con O'Neill Festival then is moving on. We're gonna, if you're watching, and then you'll probably see some of the comments that are kind of streaming down the side of, well, from where I am anyway, you can see them streaming down the side of the production. Gordon McCoy is watching. I'm obsessed with Con O'Neill. We know. Gordon McCoy came up with this great line in the office one day. Anyone who starts to follow the Con O'Neill story goes slightly mad, and I wouldn't infer that that's happened to Gordon, but I think there is a kind of a Macbeth type scenario where people get obsessed with Con and he gets inside their head. So be warned, but also be intrigued. Stephen Carson, this documentary is incredibly interesting. Everyone loves the Gordon documentary. Including Kathy Woodward, Nuala Connolly, into Samuel Gordon, Mark McConville, outstanding in your own field, Gordon. Gurmagat says Peter Murphy, Kathy Woodward. So interesting, Gordon, really enjoyed that. And then the Gail story, Elodie Duclos. I've watched the video before and it's excellent. Great job to get people to understand all the various reasons to learn Irish. So onwards then to the next piece then. And I've seen this kind of develop over a little while as well. And full disclosure, Colette Bailey, I married Colette Bailey, so she has delivered this piece of art. It's called Con's Great Escape. And it is a way of approaching the story through arts and crafts and through the narrative that is accessible to young people. And I think it's a work in progress. Hopefully, in a future festival, hopefully next year, there will be a book and there will be other things that will grow out of this. So as we go then, this is a sort of a presentation. It's been narrated by Kiva O'Connell, and sit back and enjoy.
Con O'Neill died just over 400 years ago in 1619. He was born into the O'Neill clan, the strongest Gaelic family in Ireland. There are no surviving paintings of Con, but this is what a traditional Irish chieftain would have worn. He belonged to a part of the O'Neill family that was called the Clan Ia Bui, the family of the yellow-haired Hugh. Con ruled over Upper Clandyboy, which included East Belfast, Down, Bangor, Newtownards, and an area around Strangford Lough. He had 244 townlands, consisting mostly of forests, where he would have hunted for deer, boar, and fish. He lived in a castle up on the hill. It was called An Cashlan Riabach, the Grey Castle, which became known as Castlereagh. The English called his castle the Eagle's Nest. In their mind, the eagle needed to be taken down from his tree. His castle was at the top of what is known as the Church Road. There is no trace of it now, but this is how other Gaelic castles at the time looked. From his castle, Con could see down the craggy glen to Belfast Lough. Some of the local Gaelic place names have survived. Ballyhackamore is Bwalya and Hackamore, which means the town of the mudflat. Ballymacarrat is Bwalya Vic Garage Macarrat settlement. Lisnashara is Lisn, the fort of the foals. Glentoran is Cluan Choran, meadow of the boundary. And Knocknagony, Crocknagunny, the hill of the rabbits. He could also look down on the Loop and the Knock rivers as they made their way into Belfast Lough. Where the two rivers met, there was Con's Bridge and the Conswater River. Also in the hills, there were circular mounds of land where the ancient Irish lived before Con. One of these was called Lisnabrina, the Rath of the Fairy Dwelling, known now as Lisnabrini. There was another rath nearby where an important ceremony took place. This is where the chieftains took their place on the throne. The stone throne was probably at the centre of the rath. When it was Con's time to become leader, he rode up on his horse. The clan had gathered to take part in this important moment. During the ceremony, a wand from a hazel tree was waved around his head. This was the Slat an Chearna. Also, a single shoe was passed over the new ruler. The stick stood for a change of power, and the shoe was a symbol of loyalty. Con was a ruler during a time of great change. The old Irish families were being challenged by people from England and Scotland who wanted the rich land and the valuable timber. So there was a contest of will between Con alongside his partner Eilish. She was known as a sharp, nimble wife. She was from an important family in Armagh. Arthur Chichester was the governor of Carrickfergus. He represented the interests of the English. Queen Elizabeth was the English ruler until she died in 1603. She was replaced by King James I. Hugh Montgomery was an influential Scottish merchant who was keen for more Scots to settle in Ulster. There was a dramatic change in Con's story around 1602. He had been feasting in his castle, and he sent some of his men down for extra supplies of wine. The suppliers were on their way back up to the castle, but there was a dispute with some English soldiers. In the argument that followed, an English soldier was killed. And so, in 1603, Con was taken to Carrickfergus Castle and held prisoner. But his wife Eilish had decided that Con was going to escape. She was able to visit her husband, and at the castle on her last visit, she brought a special gift. It was a large cheese, but inside the cheese, Eilish had hidden a rope. She had also arranged a plan with Hugh Montgomery, the Scottish merchant, who brought a ship close to the castle at night. Con let down the rope and climbed out of the turret of the castle. And so Con was on his way to freedom. The boat took him to Bangor Abbey, where he hid for a few days before sailing to Scotland and meeting with Hugh. Sadly, Con had to pay for his escape and his return back to Ireland. This cost him a large part of his land. In the years that followed, Con lost almost everything. He said goodbye to his castle in 1608. In his final years, he had no more than 8 townlands to his name, and he spent much of his time in the area around Dundonald and Newtownards. He was buried near Moatlands by the old Hollywood Road. At the time of his passing, the Gaelic influence was starting to die out in this part of Ireland. And the Irish language was also vanishing. But the ghost of Con O'Neill lives on. His name survives in the Conswater River and in local streets like Consbrook Avenue. We still remember his old castle when we travel on the Castlereagh Road. Irish is spoken again in East Belfast, and Con's story is being rediscovered. So, while his ancient throne is now in the Ulster Museum, the real power is high in the hills above Belfast, where our very own Game of Thrones still plays out.
Wasn't that good? That was yet another instance of people finding inspiration and finding a way to express themselves through the historical stories and the imaginary kind of resonances of Con O'Neill. So we have one more piece to go before we sign off for the Con O'Neill Online Festival 2020. It's been a challenge for all of us, and so many great people have risen to the occasion. And the next piece then is you thought you knew Craigie Glen, but you don't know the half of it, because Mark Doherty goes up there for the next 23 minutes and reveals so much and sparks up so much enthusiasm. The film is made by Will McConnell, and I'm absolutely sure that you're going to enjoy it.
Good morning, my name's Mark Doherty, and I'm very happy to be a volunteer helper with Turas, the Irish language organisation in East Belfast. And one of the aims of Turas is to revive the all but forgotten Gaelic culture of East Belfast. This is rather interesting, and during this little walk I will introduce you to a few aspects of it. Where we're standing now is at the very top of the Craigie Road, where it hits onto the A55 outer ring. And as you will see, it's 6 lanes of traffic wide, rather a busy spot, though not so bad on a Sunday morning. So if you cross the road, there's a little gateway here, and that leads through to another world. Where we are now is at the entrance to the delightful Craigie Glen. This, let's say 1,000 years ago, was a heavily wooded area. But now there's only one small remnant of that ancient woodland left, and that's because it's been protected by this steep little glen. I'm very fortunate that I live very locally to here, only a few minutes walk, and we refer to this area as Craigie. It's actually from the Irish Craiga, which means rocky place. Indeed, the nearest road heading up the hills to the east of here is called the Rocky Road. So if you'd like to accompany me now, we'll go for a little dander up the glen. I'm very fortunate indeed living near here, because during the recent epidemic, I could go up here on the bright spring and summer mornings, and there's nowhere better to come for your mental health and well-being. Maybe bring the dog along. One of East Belfast's most famous sons, Van Morrison, has said about this place, going up the Castlereagh Hills and the Craigie Glens in summer and coming back to Hindford Street, feeling wondrous and lit up inside with a sense of eternal life. So it'll be nice during this tour to get an appreciation of why this place has inspired him and many others, including myself, so much. The Craigie Glen leads up into the Castlereagh Hills with fantastic views over the Lagan Valley and over County Down. And this area used to be known as Upper Clandyboy and was owned by the last Gaelic chieftain of this area, Con O'Neill. Con O'Neill, he was born around 1574, and he was born in the castle of Castlereagh, which stood in these hills. He lived until 1619, and over his time living in this area, he saw many fundamental changes in society. Where I'm standing now is in the Craigie River, which bubbles down over rapids and waterfalls from the hills. This then, when it reaches the outer ring, disappears in a culvert under the Craigie Road. At that point, it's called the Glenbook River. After a short distance at Mount Marion Avenue, it becomes the Loop River. This flows on for a short distance, and then it will join up with the Knock River to form the Connswater. The Connswater itself flows under the Connswater Bridge in the Newtonards Road, and then it goes through Victoria Park and flows out into the Lagan and Belfast Lough. So little would the last chieftain of this area, Con O'Neill, have ever imagined in his wildest dreams that a little piece of land where the river flows out into Belfast Lough would eventually be transformed and become the largest shipyard in the world, eventually launching many of the largest ships in the world, including, of course, SS Titanic. Where we are now is in the heart of Craigie Glen, which is an absolutely stunning place to visit at any time of year. Particularly, I would recommend in spring when the bluebells are out. The sides of it are carpeted with tens of thousands of bluebells. This place is still totally natural, all native woodland and flowers. And in a later tourist presentation, we will be talking about the trees and the flowers and their Irish names as well. So this place then, it is under the care of the National Trust, who take very good care of it indeed. And there are 7 little bridges that will take us from the A55 dual carriageway up to the Manse Road in the hills. Craigie Glen cuts down through the Castlereagh Hills towards the River Lagan. It's one of many beautiful little glens in this area. I took an opportunity to explore these during lockdown. Next to this, we have a private glen, Castlereagh Glen, where the Merrock stream flows. If we go to the west, we have Breda Glen as well, another beautiful glen flowing through Beaver Forest. And then beyond that, very difficult of access and muddy, we have Minnowburn Glen. The whole glen, including this beautiful waterfall, is overhung by trees. We've got a great mix of trees in here, particularly beech, ash and Scots pine as well. The trees have a bit of a problem. They want to grow towards the light, so they grow very tall, but they've got very thin soil on the rocky sides, very steep sides. So through reaching for the light, eventually most of the trees will fall into the glen. So we have lots of tree trunks lying across the river as we go. Some of them, and you might see behind the waterfall, some of them grow up and form like an elbow and still carry on up to the sky and manage to cling on for life. This glen has some rather surprising associations, including with the United Irishmen. One of the last of the ringleaders to be on the run was Thomas Russell, and apparently he actually hid out in this glen in 1803. He was hidden in a shed in the woodlands in the area owned by a man called James Witherspoon. Apparently there was a bounty of £1,500 on his head, which is an enormous sum of money for that time, but James Witherspoon wouldn't accept the reward, and he sheltered Thomas Russell for a period of time. Eventually he was caught though, and he was hanged and beheaded in Downpatrick. Here is an example of a tree that has fallen across the stream. I call this one the Indiana Jones Bridge, and it's lovely in springtime because you get the flowers growing on it. But even now, look at it, it's covered in all sorts of growth in the moss, lots of lovely clover, for instance. So it's quite a nice spot, though you have to tread very carefully. Don't try this at home. These little rapids are very near to the top of the glen, and I love coming up here early in the morning when there are not many people around, and the lyrics of a Van Morrison song come to mind. Go up to the mountain, go up to the glen, where silence will touch you and heartbreak will mend. So this stream, as it flows through Belfast, eventually becomes the Connswater. And the Connswater, as I mentioned earlier, is formed where the Loop and the Knock rivers meet. And where they meet, there's a lovely little bridge called Con O'Neill's Bridge. And that is in a place called the Hollow. So that's rather nice that it ties together the story of Con O'Neill with a little ancient stone bridge, which is named after him. And of course, the Hollow was mentioned in Van Morrison's most famous song, Brown Eyed Girl. So this little boardwalk actually is the seventh and last bridge on the Craigie Glen Walk. It's unusual because it's actually built in a tunnel under the road, and the boardwalk is over the top of the Glen Craigie River. So we have now climbed up through the glen, and it's opened out again, and where we are now is called Lisnabreeny, the Fort of the Fairies, and we will actually go and visit that fort shortly. So Lisnabreeny for a long time was owned by a prosperous Belfast family named the Robs. They had what was a very famous department store in the middle of town. Just before the First World War, the last Rob to live here, Nesca Rob, a very inspiring woman, she donated the house and the land to the National Trust. The family also owned most of the glen. And the house itself became the first youth hostel in Belfast. Then during the war, it was used for officers' quarters for US servicemen when they came to Belfast. After the war, it never really found a purpose for a long time, but now I'm delighted that it is used as a music department for Lagan College, Northern Ireland's first integrated secondary school. So I'd mentioned about Lisnabreeny House being used as officers' quarters for US military during the Second World War. Also in Lisnabreeny, we had an American cemetery in this field behind me. And over the war, anyone who died in Northern Ireland through accident or war, or even something as simple as a heart attack, they would all be buried in this field. By the end of the war, there were nearly 150 people interred here. After the war, they were all reinterred in either America or an American military cemetery in Cambridge, so there's actually no remains left in the field. So this is a lovely memorial that was only unveiled in recent years. So this memorial then has the names of all those who had been interred here, and some of them unfortunately were killed in air crashes. It was quite common during the Second World War across the north of Ireland, not just in Northern Ireland, but in Donegal as well, for planes to crash into high ground. So a B-17 again, actually crashed into Cave Hill. We can actually see it from the memorial. The 10 crew were killed immediately, and their names are included on the war memorial. And I think it's very nice that their names have been included on the side that faces towards Cave Hill. And that sad story, it's actually been now been memorialized in film by Richard Attenborough. Sir Richard Attenborough, his last film was a film called Closing the Ring. And what inspired him to make that film was that someone found a wedding ring amongst the wreckage of the plane and traced it back to, it belonged to Lawrence Dundon. And they actually traced back to Ruth, whose name along with his was inside the ring, and gave that ring back to her in America. Now we've walked up out of the glen. We're now up in the Castlereagh Hills in a very different landscape. So we're just coming up a lovely little boreen at the minute, further up into the hills. And boreen actually is from the Irish bohereen, which means little road. So it's not boring, it's boreen. So where we are now, there's lots of lovely old gateways, and I love the little curly bit, like a Bishop's Crook at the end, and the National Trust has maintained them very well indeed. So we're well up into the Castlereagh Hills now, and we're now surrounded by the whins or the gorse bushes. To come up here in summer, it's all completely yellow around you, very, very colourful indeed. So from here, we can look across the whole dramatic panorama of the Lagan Valley. We can see it from the shipyards, the whole way up through the city and out into the countryside towards Lisburn. If you look at the profile of the horizon in the distance, we can see Cave Hill and then stretching all the way across to the highest point on the top of Divis Mountain. So the higher we get in the hills, the more inspiring the view becomes, and our panorama opens out and we can see all the way to the Mourne Mountains in the distance. They're just lovely silhouetted as they are in the late morning light. The Castlereagh Hills then, they're actually named over the old castle of the O'Neills, Castlereagh. The Irish of it is possibly the grey or the speckled castle, and it stood about a mile away from here towards Belfast on Church Road. There's unfortunately none of the castles left in the field where it used to stand, but that would have been the last stronghold of Con O'Neill, where he would have been born in 1574 or thereabouts. So the castle's gone, but it's quite interesting to contemplate where it stood if you stand in that field, because you get a view from there, from the old Gaelic seat of power to the modern seats of power, both Stormont over in the Craigantlet Hills and the copper domes of City Hall in the middle of Belfast. So it'd be more than 400 years ago now that Con O'Neill and the old Gaelic clans would have lived in these hills. It was a lot safer than living in the valley. The Lagan Valley was very swampy, so they would have lived up here, both for the factor of being safer and also to have views over the surrounding land. Now, Con himself, he owned, it said, 224 townlands, so he owned an enormous piece of Ireland. He would have been a millionaire of his day. He would have owned land as far as Lisburn, as far as Killylea, as far as Portavogie, and the whole of North Down, taking in Hollywood and Bangor. So Con wasn't a particularly warlike Gaelic lord, but he still fell into trouble with the English planters who had come in, and the English and Scottish planters, and he did end up in prison in Carrickfergus Castle at one point. He was sprung from it by a Scottish man, Hugh Montgomery, and spent time in Ayrshire. He did eventually visit King James I of England in the company of Montgomery and another man, James Hamilton, and they came to a settlement basically dividing Upper Clandeboy, Con's territory, into three. So Con retained a third of it, which, no coincidence, it had no coastline, because the coastline was very important for communication with the outside world. So Corns was a bit of a sad decline, with his castle in Castlereagh watching his surrounding territory slowly but surely being lost to the new people who came in, who were smart operators, let's say. So as Con grew older, he gradually sold off his townlands a few at a time, until it's said by the time that he died in 1619, he retained 2 or possibly 4 of his original 224 townlands. Okay, so Con O'Neill in 1601, his father died, and he became the Lord of Castlereagh, and he would have had his traditional Gaelic inauguration in these hills. That, we believe, took place at an inauguration mound with an inauguration stone chair. The mound, amazingly, still exists. It's in very dense woodland not far from here. It's very difficult to get at or to see at all at present. And it's thought that the stone chair sat either on it or beside it. So there's quite an elaborate ritual in front of the clan where he took on responsibility for the land as the leader of these people and to care for his people in the Clandyboy area. Amazingly, this rude stone chair is still with us. It lay abandoned and forgotten in the ruins of Castlereagh for about 150 years. It was then rescued and brought down into Belfast. It was built into a wall at the old butter market in Waring Street as a novelty, and people would sit on it. Well, no selfies in those days, but people would have sat on it for a novelty. When that butter market was eventually swept away as the city developed, the chair had quite a few adventures. It ended up on the west coast of Ireland, in County Sligo for quite a period. And then a group of scholarly gentlemen who were interested in history raised the money to bring it back to Belfast. And it is now on proud display in the Ulster Museum. So, welcome to Lisnabrini, the Wrath of the Fairies, and I would firstly like to thank the fairies for their permission to come up to the Wrath today. I checked my emails this morning and they gave it the thumbs up, so thank you to them. So this is a Wrath, a very special and ancient place. What it is a circular ditch, quite a large circular ditch, with the channel on the outside and the bank on the inside. So these would have been prehistoric farmsteads, and they would have been dotted all over Ireland, some a bit further afield in Scotland and Isle of Man as well, but they're predominantly an Irish feature. And it said at one time there were possibly 50,000 or more of these spread across Ireland. Where we are in the Castlereagh Hills, within a couple of miles of here, I'd know of 10 of them. In surprising places, for instance, there's one in Roselawn Cemetery, and the layout of the cemetery has taken the Wrath into account, which is very nice. There's another one, the Queen's Fort, which is within 200 metres of Carryduff Roundabout, completely surrounded by trees. So these are special ancient places, most commonly planted with trees as well. They were viewed as somehow sacred, something from the past as well. And you could imagine in ancient times having the round huts, maybe with a sod or a turf roof in here, and the livestock, typically the cattle in here, and maybe a larger family group living in a place like this. So this Wrath gives us excellent views over the countryside, and there's something special about this lovely circle of green in the countryside coming up here on a lovely day like this, with maybe the local buzzards floating overhead, and indeed watching the aircraft climbing from the airport as they head inland before banking round to head towards England. Just to finish the story of Con O'Neill, It was a bit of a sad end for him, watching firstly him losing all his land, and then he even sold the townland of Castlereagh, where his castle stood, and he died in around 1619 in Ballymennock, where there's a little park out towards Hollywood now. I think he still owned that townland, and he was buried in a place off the old Hollywood Road called Ballyman. It used to be a church and a graveyard now, but it is all gone. So the story of Con, we do know of quite a few places connected with them, and if you watch out on the tourist website and Facebook page, there are regular Con O'Neill bus tours that would come here and other beautiful and interesting places associated with Con O'Neill. Okay, so Con O'Neill or his tribe picked very well whenever they built Castlereagh in about 1350 in these hills, because the views are phenomenal. From here, I can look through this gate and I can see the top of Divis, I can see Cave Hill, I can see Craigantlet and Stormont, and then as you look round, I can see Scrabo with its tower on top, and we can see stretching out virtually the whole length of Strangford Lough as well. So this is, in fact, stretching the whole way to Coney Island, Van Morrison's country. So to visit this beautiful place of Lisnabreeny, of course, look out for the Tourist Con O'Neill bus tours, but you can come here yourself as well. If you drive up the Lisnabreeny Road, there's this lovely little National Trust car park. You can park here and it's just a level walk down as far as that beautiful Rath. If you go further, you can look at these wonderful views over the Lagan Valley, and maybe you'd want to descend into the lovely glen as well.
Wasn't that great? There you go. That was Mark Doherty taking us through the Craigie Glen right up to Lisnabreeny, and so much content, so much substance there, and we've got a little running commentary as well. Geraldine says brilliant. Simon says Galanta are fine, and Kate says Inta Samuel. So everybody's digging it. Well done, Mark. Nice bit of filming there by Will McConnell. And that brings us to the end of our third annual Con O'Neill Festival, a festival like no other. Been very difficult, and getting nostalgic for Mark talking about the Bluebells in Craigie Glen, and hopefully come 2021 we will be at large then to walk and to have tours and to partake in physical festival events. Let's hope so. If you go to cardsoftourists.com, there is a beautiful kind of guide to the flora and fauna and the Irish language, and you can play a game with the fairies. So well done for Kiva for putting that together. And last night then, we should say thank you to everyone, including Roy Greer, the author of the Con book, and that's available in Waterstones and hopefully in Tesco quite soon as well. So check out for that. To Kiva, who presented the fairy game and the flora and fauna story. To Linda, who introduced the whole thing and who runs the tourist enterprise with such panache. And also then to Dee McAdams, who's been in the background and making all this digital experience seem so effortless. It's been a challenge enough. So check out Tourists YouTube next week. All our socials will be pointing towards it when a lot of this content is going to be archived. So that's all great. And what else can I say? There will be more kind of con stories and developments in the weeks to come. There is a Con O'Neill steering group who've got some quite interesting plans, well, very interesting and very ambitious plans, and that will be developed over the gist of time. I'm just looking around. Who else helped us to put this together then? Let me have a look. The Urban Villages Initiative, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, in relation with the Ireland Reconciliation Fund, to Cards of Tourists, the Friends of Tourists, who are such a great help, and to Carmel, who heads all of that up, and to CRC, who helped with Gail's video. What a bunch of people. We're very privileged to have a lot of supporters and a lot of great people. And to everyone who's watching, there's April has just said, this is great, big fan of Con, didn't know there was a festival. So everybody's written for it. It's been a unique experience. And I'm Stuart Bailey signing off, but thank you very much. And we'll be back next year. Slán.